My father forged power of attorney to take out $180,000 against my house for my brother's so-called business. Then my brother moved in, changed my locks, and now the whole family says I'm tearing us apart for pressing charges. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when your entire world gets ripped out from under you? When the people you love most shatter your trust so completely, you question everything. Well, that's exactly what happened to me when I discovered my own father had forged my signature and stolen $180,000 right from under my nose, using my own house as collateral. And the worst part? They then tried to paint me as the villain. 5 years ago, after literally saving every single penny from my demanding construction management job, I bought my first house. This wasn't just some building. This 2-bedroom ranch was everything I'd worked for. It was independence, security, and a huge sense of pride. I'd even helped my parents and my brother out financially whenever they needed it, despite my pretty modest income. I never, not in a million years, imagined that returning home from a work trip, I'd find a $180,000 loan taken out against my house, a loan I knew absolutely nothing about. The immediate shock turned into a cold, hard dread when I saw the forged signature. My own father's handwriting mimicking mine. That betrayal cut deeper than any wound. Growing up in a pretty standard, middle-class neighborhood in Michigan, things seemed normal enough. My dad, Harold, was an electrical engineer, and my mom, Martha, taught elementary school. We never had those fancy vacations or expensive toys, but there was always food on the table and a roof over our heads. Our parents constantly hammered home that family comes first, a principle that would later be twisted and weaponized against me. My older brother, Dean, who was 3 years my senior, was always the charismatic, outgoing one. He was the natural center of attention at every family gathering. Me? I was the quieter, more methodical kid. This difference created this weird, unspoken competition, but it often felt like I was the only one participating. My parents, especially my dad, clearly favored Dean, even when his choices were, shall we say, questionable. While Dean was out playing sports and dating the popular girls in high school, I was hitting the books and working part-time at a local hardware store. Dean eventually dropped out of community college after 2 semesters, declaring it a waste of time. Meanwhile, I finished high school and immediately jumped into a construction crew, learning every single aspect of the business from the ground up. College isn't for everyone, my dad would say, always defending Dean, while simultaneously pushing me to take night classes just to have something to fall back on. So I listened. I worked full-time during the day and spent 3 nights a week at community college, earning my associate degree in construction management. By 24, I'd worked my way up to assistant project manager at Johnson Construction, overseeing residential developments. During those early years, I basically lived in a tiny studio apartment, aggressively saving for a down payment on a home. Dean, on the other hand, was bouncing between my parents' basement and various girlfriends' apartments. His employment history was a case study in job hopping, bartender, car salesman, gym trainer, insurance agent, never sticking with anything for more than 8 months. Each departure came with a dramatic story about unreasonable bosses or toxic workplaces, never once an acknowledgement of his own responsibility. Then came Dean's entrepreneurial phase. First, it was an online dropshipping business, selling fitness supplements that totally collapsed after 3 months. Next, a mobile car detailing service that somehow never attracted a single customer. Then, a cryptocurrency investment scheme that lost money during a market upswing. After every single failure, my parents would conveniently provide a loan to help him get back on his feet, money I knew deep down they would never, ever see again. Through all of this, I just kept my head down, working 60-hour weeks, and by 27, I was promoted to full project manager. My diligence finally paid off when I qualified for a mortgage on a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in a quiet suburb. That $45,000 down payment represented years of sacrifice, no vacations, a minimal social life, and a diet that consisted largely of ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. The day I got the keys to that house is still one of the proudest moments of my entire life. I remember standing in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, feeling this profound sense of accomplishment. This 1,100 square foot house, with its small yard and outdated kitchen, was mine. I had earned every single brick, every shingle, every creaky floorboard. You got lucky with the housing market, Dean commented at my small housewarming party, not even trying to hide his sarcasm. Right place, right time. My father just nodded in agreement, adding, plus, you've always had it easier than your brother. You just fit into the system better. I bit back my frustration. How could working 2 jobs while taking night classes for years be described as having it easier? But this was the narrative my family had painstakingly constructed. Dean was the misunderstood genius whose talents were too vast for conventional success, while I was just fortunate. Despite this simmering resentment, I still kept regular contact with my family. Sunday dinners at my parents' house became a tradition, and I helped them financially whenever I could. When my father retired early at 59 because of worsening arthritis, I actually paid their property taxes one year when their fixed income fell short. As for my mom, Martha, she usually existed as my father's echo, rarely forming her own opinions about family matters. My older sister, Stephanie, had moved to Chicago years earlier, only visiting on major holidays, and she generally sided with our parents in any disagreement. Then came Dean's can't-miss opportunity, a sports bar and grill in a strip mall near the community college. He pitched it as a guaranteed success, citing the location and his connections in the restaurant business from his 3 months as a bartender years earlier. This is different from my other ventures, Dean insisted over dinner at our parents' house last spring. I've done the research. The previous restaurant only failed because the owner got divorced. The equipment is already there. We just need capital for renovation, licensing, and initial inventory. My father looked at me expectantly. Maxwell, your brother could really use a partner in this. Someone with your business sense would be an asset. I knew what was coming. Next, the request for money, thinly disguised as an investment opportunity. I need about $100,000 to start, Dean continued, confirming every one of my suspicions. We could be equal partners. Rather than just dismissing the idea outright, I asked to see his business plan. To my surprise, Dean actually produced a document, clearly downloaded from a template website and hastily filled in with wildly optimistic projections. After reviewing the numbers at home, I immediately spotted the fatal flaws. The rental costs were triple what the projected revenue could support. The staffing plan was severely understaffed for the proposed hours. The initial inventory estimates were based on wholesale prices only available to established, high-volume restaurants. And most concerning, there was absolutely no accounting for the 6 to 12 months most new restaurants operate at a loss before becoming profitable. When I declined to invest the following week, explaining my concerns with the plan, Dean's friendly demeanor just evaporated. You've always been jealous of my ideas, he snapped. You want me to fail so you can keep looking like the responsible one. My father called later that evening, his disappointment heavy in his voice. Family is supposed to support each other. Maxwell, your brother was counting on you. Dad, the numbers don't add up, I explained. Patiently, it would be throwing money away. Not everything in life is about spreadsheets and calculations, he replied. Sometimes you have to take a chance on family. The conversation ended with his heavy sigh, a sound I had heard countless times throughout my life, the audible expression of how I had, once again, failed to meet his expectations. 2 weeks later, I was asked to oversee a 3-week project in Toronto. It was my first international assignment, a huge career opportunity. Before leaving, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some mail that had been mistakenly delivered to me and casually mentioned my upcoming trip. 3 weeks in Canada. Fancy, Dean commented from the couch, not even looking up from his phone. I had no idea that this casual piece of information would set in motion events that would shatter my family forever. I returned from Toronto, utterly exhausted but incredibly satisfied with a successfully completed project. My flight landed late Sunday evening, and I took a rideshare straight home, absolutely craving my own bed after 3 weeks of hotel living. Grabbing my accumulated mail from the box, I flipped through the envelopes, bills, advertisements, and then a statement from Atlantic Regional Bank, an institution I had never done business with. Assuming it was junk mail, I almost tossed it aside. But something made me open it. Maybe the official tone of the envelope, or just simple curiosity. Inside was a monthly statement for a home equity line of credit in the amount of $180,000, with my name and address clearly printed at the top. My first thought was identity theft. Someone had stolen my information and fraudulently taken out a loan against my property. I checked the date. The loan had been initiated just 6 days after I left for Toronto. The coincidence sent a freezing chill through me. Sleep completely forgotten, I called the 24-hour customer service number on the statement. After verifying my identity, or rather, the identity of whoever had taken out this loan, the representative confirmed that, yes, I had a home equity line of credit with their institution, secured against my property. According to their records, you applied in person at their downtown branch, and the funds had been fully disbursed to a business checking account. There must be a mistake. I insisted. I never applied for this loan. My mortgage is through First Community Bank. Sir, we have all the signed documents on file, including the notarized power of attorney. That was presented, the representative explained calmly. I can see here that you granted power of attorney to Harold Crawford, who completed the application process on your behalf. My blood ran cold at the mention of my father's name. I never signed a power of attorney for anyone, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The representative suggested I visit my local branch in the morning to sort out the misunderstanding, but I already knew. This was no mistake. Sleep was impossible that night. I paced my house, checking for any signs of disturbance. Nothing seemed overtly wrong, but something definitely felt off. Items slightly out of place, a different scent in the air. I pulled up my online banking and confirmed my original mortgage was still there, unchanged. But now my house effectively had 2 loans against it, totaling far more than the property's value. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I was waiting outside Atlantic Regional Bank when they opened their doors. The branch manager, Marcus Daniels, reviewed my identification and pulled up the loan documents. There it was, my signature on multiple pages. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close. Close enough to fool someone who didn't know my handwriting. But the subtle differences were glaringly clear to me. I need copies of everything. I told Marcus, my voice tight. This signature is forged. I never applied for this loan or signed a power of attorney. Marcus looked uncomfortable, but he provided the copies. The document package included a notarized power of attorney granting my father full authority to conduct financial transactions on my behalf. The notary stamp belonged to someone I had never even heard of. We also have security footage of all transactions, Marcus added hesitantly. Would you like me to check the dates in question? 45 minutes later, I was staring at grainy but sickeningly clear footage of my father and brother at this very bank, signing documents and smiling, shaking hands with a loan officer. The timestamp showed it happened exactly 1 week after I had left for Toronto. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Eleanor Peterson. Maxwell, she said. I just wanted to check if everything's okay with your brother staying at your house. I noticed he's been coming and going for weeks while you were away. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. My brother has been staying at my house. Yes, for about 3 weeks now. He told me you asked him to house sit while you were in Canada. He even had that girlfriend of his over several times. I thought it was a bit odd when they started bringing in furniture last week, but I figured maybe you were letting him stay longer. I thanked Eleanor and hung up, my mind racing. Pulling into my driveway, I now noticed subtle changes I had missed in my exhaustion the night before. Different curtains visible through the front window. An unfamiliar welcome mat at the door. Inside, the evidence mounted. The spare bedroom had been converted into what looked like a home office, complete with a new desk and computer. My kitchen cabinets contained unfamiliar dishes and food items. The refrigerator held beer brands I never drank. In the trash, I found receipts for large-screen televisions, sound systems, restaurant equipment, and bar supplies. 1. Receipt for commercial kitchen appliances totaled over $30,000. Another showed a $15,000 payment to a graphic designer for a logo and brand identity package. My hands shaking, I call my father. Dad, I need to talk to you about a home equity loan taken out on my house. A long pause. Oh, you're back from Canada. His voice was unnaturally casual. Yes, we needed to access some funds for Dean's business. It's all being put to good use. You forged my signature and stole $180,000, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. That's a very dramatic way to put it, he replied. It's just a family matter. Dean needed startup capital, and you weren't using that equity. The business will pay the loan back once it's established. You committed fraud, I said. You took out a loan in my name without my knowledge or permission. Maxwell, you're overreacting. We're family. The money stays in the family. Dean's business will benefit all of us eventually. Where is Dean now? I demanded. Probably at the property he leased for the restaurant. They're starting renovations this week. I hung up. Without saying goodbye, a coldness settling in my chest. The family I had trusted and supported had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and they seemed to think it was perfectly justified. I drove to my parents' suburban home that evening without calling ahead, my mind cycling between disbelief, rage, and a desperate hope that there was some explanation that would make sense of all this. The familiar one-story brick house with its well-maintained lawn had been my childhood home for 18 years. Now, it felt like the headquarters of people who had conspired against me. Both my parents' cars were in the driveway, along with Dean's faded blue Mustang, a car he had owned for years, but somehow always had money to maintain despite his chronic unemployment. I parked behind them, blocking them in deliberately. Through the dining room window, I could see them all seated around the table. My father, mother, Dean, and surprisingly, my sister Stephanie, who must have driven in from Chicago. They were eating dinner as if nothing was wrong, as if they hadn't committed a crime against me. The domesticity of the scene made my blood boil. I didn't knock. I used my old key and walked straight in, the screen door slamming behind me. Maxwell. My mother looked up, startled. We weren't expecting you. There's plenty if you want to join us for. You forged documents to steal $180,000 from me. I interrupted, staring directly at my father. You committed fraud and identity theft against your own son. The table fell silent. My father set down his fork deliberately. That's not what happened, he said calmly. I made a decision, as the head of this family, to allocate resources where they were needed. Dean has a viable business opportunity that will benefit everyone. Benefit everyone, I echoed in disbelief. You took out a loan in my name that I'm legally responsible for without my knowledge or consent. That's the textbook definition of fraud. Dean leaned back in his chair, looking annoyed rather than guilty. The business is already underway, Max. The loan is an investment in our family's future. Once the sports bar is up and running, we'll pay back the loan and then some. Did you think I wouldn't notice an extra mortgage on my house? I snapped. Did you think the bank wouldn't send statements? What exactly was your plan here? My mother reached toward me, her expression pleading. Honey, we were going to tell you when you got back. We just needed to move quickly on the property lease before someone else took it. So, you all knew about this? I looked around the table. All of you were in on this. Stephanie shifted uncomfortably. I just found out today, but honestly, Max, it seems like you're overreacting. Dad has power of attorney. A forged power of attorney. I shouted, slapping the copy documents onto the table. I never signed this. This is a crime. My father's face hardened. Dean needed the money. And you have the house. You've always been more financially stable. This is about family. Taking care of family. Taking care of family, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. By committing fraud? By stealing. Dean stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. You weren't using all that equity anyway. Your house is just sitting there building value while I'm trying to create something real. Something that could support all of us. Support all of us with a sports bar that will statistically fail within a year? With a business plan full of fantasy numbers? You've always been jealous of my ambition. Dean shot back. Always trying to prove you're better than me with your steady job and your perfect credit score. Some of us take risks to achieve greatness. My mother began to cry softly. Please, boys, we're family. We can work this out without fighting. This isn't a fight, Mom, I said, my voice dangerously low. This is a crime. Dad and Dean committed fraud. They stole from me. No one stole anything, my father insisted. The money is being invested in a family business. Dean has already secured the location and ordered equipment. A horrible thought struck me. The receipts I found at my house. You've been living there? Dean at least had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. Just temporarily. The lease on my apartment ended, and since you were away for 3 weeks, who gave you permission to stay in my house? Dad did. Dean replied, as if it were obvious. He has power of attorney. A forged power of attorney. I was shouting again, unable to control my anger. Maxwell, lower your voice, my father commanded, as if I were still a child under his authority. This is exactly why. We didn't consult you first. You're too emotional about money, too rigid. Dean saw an opportunity. That wouldn't wait. An opportunity? I laughed bitterly. How's the business going so far? Dean, making a profit yet? A look passed between Dean and my father. There have been some unexpected startup costs, Dean admitted. And the permit process is taking longer than anticipated. Which means it's failing already, I translated. How much of my money have you already spent? It's not your money, Dean snapped. It's a loan against your house. There's a difference. A loan I'm legally responsible for. A loan that will ruin my credit and possibly cost me my house if you don't repay it. Stephanie, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. Max has a point. This is pretty serious, Dad. If you signed his name, stay out of this, Stephanie. My father cut her off. This is between me, Dean, and your brother. Actually, it's between me and law enforcement. Now, I said quietly, I want the loan paid off immediately. The room went dead silent. What are you saying? My mother whispered. I'm saying that unless the $180,000 is returned and the loan closed within 48 hours, I'm pressing charges for fraud and identity theft. My father's face flushed red. You would send your own father to jail. Over money. Over betrayal. I corrected him. Over the complete violation of my trust and financial security. Dean laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know, we don't have that kind of money just sitting around. The funds are tied up in the business now. Then liquidate the business, sell the equipment, do whatever you need to do. It doesn't work that way. Dean shouted. We've signed leases, contracts. We've made commitments. Not my problem, I replied. Coldly. You made this mess. You figure it out. My mother was openly sobbing now. Please. Maxwell, your father could go to prison. Is that what you want? What I want is my money back. And my house secure. What I want is for my family not to have betrayed me in the first place. Dean crossed his arms. Well, good luck getting me out of your house. I've been living there for weeks now. I've established residency. I looked it up. Legally, you can't just throw me out. You'd have to formally evict me, which takes months. He smirked. The realization that my own brother was now essentially squatting in my home and threatening to make it difficult for me to remove him was the final straw. You have 48 hours, I repeated, looking at my father. Then I go to the police. I walked out, ignoring my mother's pleas and my father's angry declarations about family loyalty. As I drove away, my phone began buzzing with text messages from Stephanie. You're tearing this family apart over money. Dad could have a heart attack from this stress. Dean made a mistake, but sending family to jail isn't the answer. Mom is devastated. Is this really what you want? I turned off my phone and drove in silence, the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me like a physical force. The family I had trusted and supported for years had not only stolen from me, but were now attempting to make me the villain for standing up for myself. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and made an appointment with Rebecca Winters, an attorney specializing in fraud cases. Her office was on the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise with views of the river and an atmosphere of quiet competence. Rebecca, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, reviewed the documents I had collected from the bank, taking detailed notes. This is textbook fraud, she confirmed after examining the forged signatures. The power of attorney document is clearly falsified, and the signatures on the loan documents don't match your actual signature. Have you filed a police report yet? No, I admitted. I gave my father 48 hours to repay the loan. She removed her reading glasses and fixed me with a direct stare. Mr. Crawford, I understand these are family members, but you need to file a police report immediately. The longer you wait, the more it appears you might have been complicit or changed your mind after the fact. But if I file a report, my father could go to jail. Yes, he could, she said, her tone softening slightly. Because he committed a serious crime. I understand this is difficult, but your father and brother have placed you in financial jeopardy. This isn't a small personal loan between family members. This is a significant fraud that affects your credit, your home, and your financial future. I left her office with a retainer agreement and a promise to call her after filing the police report. My next stop was back to Atlantic Regional Bank, where I asked to speak with Marcus Daniels. Again, we've pulled the security footage from the day the loan was processed, Marcus said, ushering me into his office. I have to say, Mr. Crawford, this looks concerning from our perspective as well. He turned his computer monitor so I could see the footage. There was my father, sitting across from a loan officer, signing documents. Dean stood nearby, occasionally pointing at papers. They both looked completely at ease, laughing and chatting with the bank employee. The loan officer who processed this, Janet Miller, has been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation, Marcus explained. She should have verified the power of attorney more thoroughly. What about the notary who supposedly witnessed my signature on the power of attorney? Marcus grimaced. We're looking into that as well. It appears to be someone who works at your brother's friend's insurance office. There are irregularities with how that was handled. I left the bank and drove directly to the police station, where I spent 2 hours filing a report and giving a statement. The detective who took my case, a weary-looking man named Ramirez, seemed unfortunately familiar with family fraud situations. Happens more than you'd think, he told me. Family members assume they won't get reported, or that it's somehow not a real crime if it's kept in the family. By the time I headed home, it was late afternoon. I pulled into my driveway and immediately noticed something wrong. My key wouldn't turn in the front door lock. After several attempts, I walked around to try the back door, with the same result. Someone had changed the locks on my house. As I stood in my own backyard, locked out of my own home, the sliding glass door opened. A woman I recognized as Natalie, Dean's latest girlfriend, stepped out. Can I help you? She asked, as if I were a stranger. This is my house, I said. Where's Dean? He's not here right now, she replied, making no move to let me in. He said you might try to cause trouble. Cause trouble? This is my house. I own it. You need to let me in immediately. Dean lives here now, she said with remarkable confidence. He said you're just upset about some family business. Disagreement. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. You're trespassing. She shrugged and went back inside, sliding the door closed. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. I explained the situation, showing them my driver's license with the address and property tax statements on my phone. Sir, we understand. This is your property, the older officer said. But if someone has been living here and receiving mail, it becomes a civil matter. We can ensure you regain entry to your home, but removing the occupants would require an eviction process through the courts. So someone can just break into my house, change the locks, and claim they live there. I asked incredulously. Not exactly, but in this case, you've acknowledged that you gave your brother a key originally, and there's evidence he's been receiving mail here. That complicates things. Eventually, they convinced Dean via phone to come home and let me in. He arrived 30 minutes later, smirking as he unlocked the door with his new key. Officers, this is a family dispute, he explained smoothly. My brother is upset about a business investment, but I've been living here with his knowledge for weeks. That's a lie, I countered. He broke in while I was away on business. The officers looked uncomfortable. Mr. Crawford, we can ensure you have access to your home today, but if you want these individuals removed, you'll need to file for eviction through the proper legal channels. Until then, we recommend you both remain civil and avoid any confrontations. Once inside, I was horrified by what I found. Dean had taken over the master bedroom, moving my belongings to the smallest bedroom. The living room now contained an expensive leather sectional I had never seen before, along with a massive television and gaming system. Empty beer Bottles and takeout containers littered the kitchen counters. What have you done to my house? I demanded once the police left. Dean lounged on his new couch. Made some improvements. That old furniture of yours was depressing. Where's my stuff? Garage, mostly. Some of it's in storage. Natalie emerged from my former bedroom, eyeing me with hostility. Are you going to be difficult? Because Dean said we might have to get a restraining order if you harass us. I laughed in disbelief. A restraining order against me? In my own house. It's not just your house anymore, Dean said smugly. Not with the equity loan. I've got a financial stake in this property now. A fraudulent stake that's going to land you and Dad in jail. I shot back. Dean's expression darkened. You really want to go there? Destroy the whole family over money? Mom called me crying all night because of you. Because of me? You stole $180,000. Borrowed, he corrected. Once the sports bar takes off, the loan will be repaid with interest. And when exactly will that be? Because from what I saw at Mom and Dad's, you haven't even opened yet. Dean waved dismissively. These things take time. We're creating a premium experience, not some dive bar. I went to inspect the rest of my house and found more infuriating changes. The spare room had been converted into an office with expensive computer equipment. My garage was piled with my furniture, much of it damaged from careless handling. My carefully maintained lawn was now littered with cigarette butts. With no other options for the night, I called my friend Tyler, who immediately offered his couch. As I packed an overnight bag, my phone exploded with messages from family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all expressing their disappointment in my greed and betrayal of family. Apparently, my parents had spread their version of events widely. From Uncle Robert, your father gave you everything growing up. How could you repay him like this? From Aunt Linda, family disputes should stay private. Involving police is shameful. From cousin Steve, dude, it's just money. Family is forever. Don't be that guy. The next day brought a threatening call from Vincent Rodriguez, Dean's business partner. You're ruining everything with this legal nonsense, he growled. We've invested too much to back out now. You need to drop this before people get really upset. Are you threatening me? I asked. I'm advising you, he replied. As someone who knows people who don't appreciate having their investments jeopardized, the stress began affecting my work performance. My boss noticed my distraction and called me into his office. Maxwell, you've always been one of our most reliable project managers, but something's clearly wrong. The Toronto client called with concerns about the follow-up documentation being delayed. I hadn't told anyone at work about my situation, embarrassed by the whole sordid mess. But now I found myself explaining everything to my boss, Tom. To my surprise, he was incredibly understanding. Take a few days off, he suggested. Get a lawyer, file the necessary paperwork, and get your house back. Your job will be waiting. Rebecca Winters helped me file for an emergency eviction hearing, but the process would still take weeks. Meanwhile, the legal bills were mounting, adding financial stress to the emotional trauma. I was effectively homeless, sleeping on Tyler's couch while strangers occupied my house, and spent my money. My mother called daily, alternating between tears and guilt trips. Your father hasn't slept in days, she told me. Is this punishment really necessary? We raised you. Better than this. Better than what, Mom? Better than standing up for myself when I've been robbed. It's not robbery when it's family, she insisted. Your father was only trying to help. Dean finally succeeded. You've always had everything come so easily to you. The distortion of reality was mind-boggling. Nothing in my life had come easily. I had worked multiple jobs, saved diligently, and made countless sacrifices to achieve financial stability. Yet somehow in my family's narrative, I was the privileged one who owed my success to others. Meanwhile, social media became another battlefield. Dean posted photos of himself in my house, hosting parties, with captions about new beginnings and family support. My sister shared vague posts about choosing peace over being right that were clearly directed at me. The isolation grew as extended family members took sides, the majority supporting my parents simply because they're your parents, as if that relationship justified any behavior, no matter how harmful or criminal. Through it all, Tyler remained steadfast in his support, even when his small apartment became cramped with my presence. "Family is supposed to have your back," he said one evening. "These people are treating you like an ATM, not a son or brother." His words crystallized what I had been feeling but couldn't articulate. My family didn't see me as a person with rights and boundaries. They saw me as a resource to be used for Dean's benefit. As the days turned into weeks, my determination only grew stronger. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for myself against people who believed they were entitled to take whatever they wanted from me without consequences. The day of the emergency eviction hearing arrived, 3 weeks after I filed the paperwork. I arrived at the county courthouse in my best suit, accompanied by Rebecca Winters. To my surprise, Dean had actually hired his own attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, who introduced himself as James Patterson. "My client has established legal residency at the property in question," Patterson argued to the judge. "Furthermore, he has a financial interest in the property through the home equity loan that was taken out with the knowledge and indirect consent of the petitioner." Rebecca countered forcefully. "Your Honor, the home equity loan was fraudulently obtained through a forged power of attorney. The criminal investigation is ongoing, but we have bank security footage and forensic handwriting analysis confirming the forgery. Mr. Dean Crawford has no legal right to occupy the property." The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed the documentation carefully. "Mr. Patterson, this power of attorney document is highly questionable," she noted. "And even if it were legitimate, it would authorize Mr. Harold Crawford to act on his son's behalf, not give permanent residency rights to another family member." Patterson shifted tactics. "Your Honor, this is clearly a family dispute that should be resolved privately. My client believed he had permission to occupy the property based on his father's authority. Belief doesn't establish legal right," the judge replied, her voice firm. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting the emergency eviction. Mr. Dean Crawford and all occupants must vacate the property within 7 days. Furthermore, they must not remove any fixtures or permanent improvements to the property." Dean glared at me across the courtroom, but said nothing. The week-long wait for the eviction to take effect was agonizing. I stayed with Tyler, anxious about what condition my house would be in when I finally regained possession. Meanwhile, I met with Detective Ramirez again, who updated me on the criminal investigation. "We've interviewed the notary who supposedly witnessed your signature," he explained. "She's admitted she never saw you sign the document. She notarized it as a favor to your brother, who claimed it was just a formality for a family business matter. So she committed notary fraud?" "Yes, and she's cooperating now to minimize her own exposure. We've also subpoenaed the bank records to track where the money went. It appears large sums were transferred to a business account, but significant amounts were also withdrawn as cash or transferred to personal accounts." The detective confirmed my suspicions. Dean was using the business as a cover to funnel money for personal use. 7 days after the court order, I met a sheriff's deputy at my house to enforce the eviction. Dean and Natalie were nowhere to be found, having apparently left the previous night. The deputy verified the property was vacant and officially returned possession to me. Once he left, I walked through my home in absolute shock. The damage was extensive. Stained carpets, holes punched in walls, broken fixtures. The expensive furniture Dean had purchased was gone, but my own furniture had been left in the garage, much of it damaged from improper storage. Food had been left to rot in the refrigerator, creating a sickening stench throughout the kitchen. I methodically photographed and videoed everything, creating documentation for both insurance claims and the ongoing criminal case. The estimate for repairs would later come to over $15,000. The next day, I took a personal day from work and drove to Atlantic Regional Bank for another meeting with Marcus Daniels. This time, I brought Rebecca with me. The bank failed in its due diligence, she stated firmly. A proper verification process would have identified the forged power of attorney. Furthermore, the loan officer who processed the application clearly didn't follow standard protocols for identity verification. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "We're conducting our own internal investigation," The loan officer has been terminated for failure to follow verification procedures. That's not sufficient, Rebecca pressed. My client's credit has been damaged. His property has been encumbered with fraudulent debt, and he has suffered significant financial and emotional distress as a direct result of your institution's negligence. After 2 hours of discussion, the bank agreed to suspend all interest and penalties on the loan while the criminal investigation proceeded. They stopped short of voiding the loan entirely, pending the outcome of the criminal case against my father and brother. As I left the bank, my phone rang. It was my sister, Stephanie. The police just arrested Dad, she said, her voice trembling. They handcuffed him and took him away in front of the whole neighborhood. Are you happy now? The news hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, the image of my father being led away in handcuffs made my stomach clench. I didn't want this, I said honestly. I wanted the loan repaid and my house back. Dad and Dean are the ones who chose to commit fraud. Mom is beside herself, Stephanie continued, ignoring my response. Dean has disappeared, and the family is falling apart all over money. It's not about money, I insisted. It's about trust and respect. They violated both. The next day, I received a text from an unknown number with an address and the message. Family meeting, 3 p.m. Come alone. Against my better judgment and Tyler's advice, I went to the address, a coffee shop near my parents' neighborhood. I found my mother, Stephanie, and 3 of my aunts waiting at a corner table. My father, out on bail, sat stiffly beside them. Maxwell, this has gone far enough. My Aunt Barbara began without preamble. Your father is facing criminal charges that could send him to prison at his age. Is that really what you want? I wanted my money back and my house secure. I repeated for what felt like the 100th time. I gave them the chance to make it right. The business was going to pay back the loan, my father insisted, speaking for the first time. You've ruined everything with your overreaction. Overreaction? I felt my temper rising. You forged my signature and stole $180,000. The other customers in the coffee shop turned to stare at our table. Lower your voice, my mother hissed. This is exactly why we're meeting in public, so you can't make a scene. The realization that they had chosen a public location to manipulate me into behaving calmly while they attacked me was the final insult. I'm done, I said, standing up. You can call my lawyer if you have anything to say to me. Maxwell Andrew Crawford, sit down this instant, my father commanded, using the full name technique that had worked when I was 10, but had no power now. I walked out, ignoring their calls and the stares of strangers. The following day, things escalated further when Dean's business partner, Vincent, showed up at my workplace. The receptionist called me to the lobby, where I found Vincent pacing angrily. You've ruined everything, he snarled. We had investors lined up, contracts signed. Now it's all falling apart because you couldn't handle a family financial arrangement. You mean fraud? I replied calmly, aware of the receptionist watching nervously. And I suggest you leave before I call security. This isn't over, he threatened before storming out. I reported the incident to Detective Ramirez, who added it to the growing file. Later that day, my boss Tom called me into his office again. Maxwell, I just received a disturbing call from someone claiming to be your father. He suggested that you're mentally unstable and making false accusations against family members due to some kind of breakdown. He even hinted that your work on the Toronto project might need auditing for errors. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were trying to destroy my career now. Tom held up his hand. I shut it down immediately. Your work speaks for itself, and I told him any further calls would be reported as harassment. But Maxwell, this is getting serious. These people seem determined to pressure you from every angle. That evening, returning to Tyler's apartment, I found my mother waiting in the parking lot. Dad had a heart attack, she said as soon as I stepped out of my car. He's in the hospital. The stress of the arrest and the shame of it all was too much for his heart. For a moment, genuine concern overwhelmed my anger. Is he okay? They're running tests, she replied. But this is what happens when you tear a family apart, Maxwell. I hope you can live with yourself if anything happens to your father. I drove her to the hospital in silence, my emotions a turbulent mix of worry, guilt, and resentment at being manipulated even in this moment of crisis. At the hospital, we found my father in a private room, looking pale but alert. Tests had confirmed a minor heart episode, not a full-blown attack. As I stood awkwardly at the foot of his bed, he fixed me with a stare. "Are you satisfied now?" he asked weakly. "Is this what you wanted?" The manipulation was so transparent, it almost took my breath away. Even in this moment, he was trying to use his health to make me back down. I wanted my family not to steal from me. I said quietly, I wanted to be treated with basic respect. "So send your father to jail," he replied. "Show the world what kind of son you really are." I left the room without another word, a strange calm settling over me. In that moment, I realized I would not capitulate. No matter what emotional weapons they deployed against me, the truth was on my side, and I would see this through to the end. 3 days after my father's health scare, Detective Ramirez called with significant news. "We've traced the money from the fraudulent loan," he explained. "Only about $60,000 actually went toward legitimate business expenses for the sports bar. The rest was diverted to personal accounts, luxury purchases, and cash withdrawals." "What does that mean for the case?" I asked. "It strengthens the fraud charges considerably. This wasn't just a misguided attempt to help a family business. It was outright theft disguised as a business investment." The next day, I received an unexpected call from Atlantic Regional Bank's legal department. After reviewing the mounting evidence of fraud, including the detective's findings, they had made a decision. "Mr. Crawford, given the extraordinary circumstances and clear evidence of fraud, we've decided to void the loan entirely," the bank's attorney informed me. "We'll be pursuing our own claims against the responsible parties, but your home will be cleared of this encumbrance." Immediately, the relief was overwhelming. My home was secure again, free from the fraudulent debt that had threatened my financial future. While I still faced the costs of repairing the damage Dean had caused, the primary threat had been neutralized. Meanwhile, the criminal case was progressing. Dean had finally been located and arrested in a neighboring state, where he'd fled after the eviction. According to Detective Ramirez, investigators had discovered this wasn't Dean's first fraud scheme. He had previously scammed several investors with non-existent business ventures, but the victims had been too embarrassed to press charges. My father, facing the mounting evidence against him and concerned about his health, agreed to a plea deal: 2 years of probation, restitution payments, and community service in exchange for a guilty plea to reduce charges. The deal would keep him out of prison, but established his legal culpability. Dean, with his prior record of financial misconduct that now came to light, faced more serious consequences. The prosecutor offered him 3 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months, or he could take his chances at trial and potentially face up to 10 years if convicted. Throughout this period, I focused on restoring my home and my peace of mind. The house that had represented such achievement and pride was now tainted with negative memories. I considered selling it, but ultimately decided to reclaim it instead, repainting every room, replacing the damaged carpets, and installing a comprehensive security system. Tyler helped me move back and spent weekends helping with repairs. "Don't let them take this from you, too," he advised. "This place represents everything you worked for. Don't give that up because of what they did." My mother made several attempts at reconciliation, calling with tearful apologies that always circled back to requests for leniency for my father and brother. "They made a mistake," she would say. "A terrible mistake, but they're still your family. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday," I replied during one such call. "What they did was a deliberate crime that took weeks of planning and deception. But family forgives," she insisted. "Forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences," I countered. "And it certainly doesn't mean allowing myself to be victimized." Again, I began seeing a therapist to process the betrayal and its aftermath. Dr. Lawson helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just fraud, but a profound violation of the basic trust that family relationships are built upon. "You're grieving," she explained during one session. "Not just the loss of money or security, but the loss of the family you thought you had. The people who were supposed to protect and support you instead exploited and betrayed you." As the criminal proceedings continued, more family members began to shift their perspectives. My Uncle Jim, my father's brother, called me after reviewing some of the evidence that had become public through court filings. "I owe you an apology, Maxwell," he said gruffly. "I assumed this was just a misunderstanding or that you were overreacting. I didn't realize the extent of what Harold and Dean did. Even my sister Stephanie eventually came around, especially after Dean's previous scams came to light. I think I've been in denial about Dean for years," she admitted. During a cautious lunch meeting, "It was easier to see you as the problem than to accept that my brother and father could do something so wrong." 6 months after the initial discovery of the fraud, I received an unexpected visitor at my house. My mother, standing alone on my doorstep without calling first. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small. I let her in, keeping my distance emotionally and physically. "Your father is starting his community service next week," she began. He's not the same man anymore. This whole thing broke something in him." I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I need to tell you something," she said, finally. "I knew about the plan before they did it. I didn't think it would hurt you. They promised the business would pay everything back quickly. I should have stopped them, but I didn't. I am so sorry, Maxwell." Her admission shocked me. While I had suspected she might have known, hearing her confirm it reopened wounds I thought were beginning to heal. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why would you let them do this to me? Dean has always been difficult. Your father has always protected him, made excuses. I thought this final investment would either help Dean succeed or finally prove to your father that Dean needs real help, not endless bailouts." She wiped away tears. "Instead, it destroyed our family. You all destroyed the family." I corrected her. "Not me. I was the victim here." She nodded slowly. "You're right. We betrayed you. I betrayed you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I understand what we did now. It wasn't quite the apology I deserved, but it was more accountability than anyone in my family had shown thus far." As for Dean, he ultimately accepted the plea deal and began serving his prison sentence. The sports bar business was liquidated to help pay restitution, revealing it had never been more than a half-formed concept with fancy equipment purchased as window dressing. 9 months after discovering the fraud, I received a letter from my father, the first direct communication since his heart episode at the hospital. "Maxwell," it began, "I've had time to reflect on my actions and their consequences. What I did was unforgivable. I violated your trust in the worst possible way, and I've lost the right to call myself your father. The justifications I made to myself now seem hollow and self-serving. I can only say that I am deeply sorry and will spend whatever years I have left trying to make amends, even knowing that full amends may never be possible." The letter continued with details of his therapy sessions, his community service working with elderly fraud victims, and his gradual recognition of how he had enabled Dean's destructive behavior. Throughout his life, I read the letter several times, searching for the manipulative angle, the hidden request, the subtle blame shifting. Finding none, I set it aside without responding, not yet ready to engage, but somewhat heartened by what seemed like genuine remorse. My own life began to stabilize. My work performance recovered and even earned me a promotion. I developed a closer circle of friends who had stood by me through the ordeal, recognizing them as the chosen family that supported me when my biological family had failed. I even began dating again, meeting Allison, a graphic designer who approached relationships with the same straightforward honesty I now demanded in all my interactions. Slowly, carefully, I rebuilt my sense of security and trust. The house that had been violated became a home again. Different, forever changed, but still mine. 1 year after discovering the forged loan documents, I stood in my backyard, watching friends gather for a barbecue. Tyler was manning the grill, his girlfriend Heather arranging plates on the patio table. My new friends from work chatted amicably, while Allison, now my girlfriend of 5 months, mixed drinks in the kitchen. The house behind me looked different. Now, fresh paint, new landscaping, an enhanced security system with cameras monitoring every approach. The interior had been renovated as well, erasing the damage Dean had caused and reclaiming the space as my own. The journey to this moment of relative peace had been painful beyond anything I could have imagined a year earlier. The betrayal by my family had forced me to confront difficult truths. about the people I had trusted most in the world. My father continued his probation regularly, making the required restitution payments. Our contact was minimal, occasional text messages, and one brief, awkward coffee meeting where we spoke mainly about the weather and current events, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. My mother had made more consistent efforts to rebuild some kind of relationship, respecting the boundaries I had established. No discussions about Dean, no requests for money, and no pressure to reconcile with my father beyond my comfort level. Our monthly lunches were strained, but gradually becoming less so. Dean remained in prison, eligible for parole in 3 months. I had received several letters from him that alternated between apology and subtle blame, suggesting that while he was sorry for hurting me, I had somehow driven him to such desperate measures by not supporting his business dreams. I didn't respond. Stephanie had become an unexpected ally, fully acknowledging the wrong that had been done to me and maintaining her own relationship with me, separate from our parents. She had even testified truthfully during the legal proceedings, despite pressure from our parents to minimize what had happened. The legal aftermath had finally concluded. The bank had implemented new verification procedures specifically because of my case. The notary, who had falsified documents, lost her license and received probation. Vincent, Dean's business partner, faced his own fraud charges after investigations revealed previous schemes. More importantly, I had learned profound lessons about trust, boundaries, and the true meaning of family. First, I learned that sharing DNA doesn't entitle anyone to abuse your trust. For years, I had accepted the narrative that family loyalty meant tolerating behavior I would never accept from others. The painful lesson of the past year was that healthy family relationships require the same respect, honesty, and boundaries as any other relationship, perhaps even more so because of their foundational nature. Second, I discovered the power of chosen family. The friends who stood by me, letting me sleep on their couches, helping me repair my home, listening to my anger and grief without judgment, demonstrated what unconditional support actually looks like. Tyler, in particular, had been more of a brother to me than Dean had ever been. Third, I recognized that standing up for myself wasn't selfish or vindictive, despite my family's attempts to frame it that way. Self-protection is not only a right, but a responsibility. By refusing to enable my family's behavior, I was actually giving them the opportunity to face consequences and potentially grow from them. Fourth, I learned that forgiveness and reconciliation are separate processes. Forgiveness was something I could work on internally, releasing the corrosive anger for my own well-being. Reconciliation, however, required genuine accountability and changed behavior from those who had harmed me, a much longer and uncertain road. Fifth, I discovered my own strength. Before this ordeal, I might have crumbled under the emotional manipulation and family pressure. Instead, I found the courage to stand firm in the truth, even when it was painful and isolating. The most valuable lesson, perhaps, was understanding that love should never require sacrificing your dignity or security. Real love builds up, protects, and respects. It doesn't exploit or manipulate. This insight had transformed not only how I approached family relationships, but all relationships in my life. As I watched Allison emerge from the house carrying a tray of drinks, smiling at something Tyler had said, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for this new chapter. The home that had been violated was now filled with genuine laughter and authentic connections. The journey of healing wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely. The betrayal had left scars that would always be part of my story. But standing in my yard, surrounded by people who truly cared for me, I felt something that had been missing during those dark months: hope. I had rebuilt not just my home, but my life, stronger and more authentic than before. The foundation of this new life wasn't blind trust or obligation, but conscious choice and mutual respect. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed serious boundaries? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in setting boundaries with family. Remember, Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stand firm in your truth, even when it's difficult. Thank you all for listening to my journey.